Hello, my soul friends. It is Victoria on the Soul Nurturer channel, and this video has been on my heart to do for years and years and years. Every year I think, I'm going to do this video because I know how much it's needed. And then every year the holidays sneak up on me as they do on you, and here we are. So this particular holiday season, I happen to be supporting a lot of people moving through their grief process during this very tender time when there's a lot of emotional reminders of our loved ones. So I invite you to join me for this heart share in the hope that it helps you and supports you. I invite you to get your box of Kleenex, get a cup of tea, turn your phone off, take this time off for you, and may something I offer help you and meet you right where you are. I wish I could just reach through and give you a hug. So let my words hug you and embrace you and support you right where you are. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about navigating the holidays while you're grieving, or healing through grief during the most intense time when, like I said, there's a lot of emotional triggers. So this video is mostly for people who are grieving the death of a loved one, but I do want to also wrap my heart around all grief. You know, my heart is with you. I have had a life journey with grief. I know this journey very well. I know how it can wake up during the holidays and catch us off guard and sneak up on us just like the holidays do. So yes, grief is grief, right? If you are grieving a change of life as you knew it, some physical challenge, some change in your career, aging, the end of a relationship, the death of a pet. Grief is grief. The heart breaks the same. And so, but this is more about, maybe it'll speak to you what I'm going to share, but it's more about when we gather for the holidays. Even though I want to say straight at the top, you have permission to do what you need for you, and I want to encourage you. Holidays can be overwhelming, so I'm going to offer some tips. I'm going to offer some ways to support yourself through the holidays, and or anytime you need support. But this is, around Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, the high holidays, into the new year. And when people are celebrating and you're not feeling celebratory. So, okay, here we go. I want to say a few things about grief at the top. And that is, grief accumulates. So maybe you have a recent loss, a recent death, a recent huge life adjustment. And you feel like, okay, gosh, this is surprising me how overwhelmed I am. I want you to think about this every time. It's like these files in our subconscious mind. You have a file in your subconscious mind connected to grief. So every time there is a new loss, a new major life adjustment, that file opens up. And especially if you didn't embrace your grief journey at previous times. Like for me, my dad died when I was 9 and my mom died when I was 17. I became a grief counselor in my 40s. I worked for hospice for a number of years. I don't anymore, but my grief snuck up on me because I was so young when my parents died. I did some work with it, did some therapy around it. But it's interesting. I never dealt with my dad's death. I never dealt with that loss. And that came front and center in my 40s. Like, okay. Wait a minute. No, I was in my 50s. Age sneaks up on you. I'll tell you what. So, I guess I'm saying this to say, be gentle and hold grace for yourself for whatever arises. And grief, it's called grief work for a reason. We need to engage in the process of healing. I often say it's kind of like if you broke your leg and you never had it reset, you're not going to walk, find a new normal of walking again. You're going to always feel that hurt, that pain. So I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but I do want to encourage you, to reach for support when needed, to recognize there is a process, a natural process happening. Grief is a natural and normal process, especially when we lean into it. We allow ourselves to feel, we allow ourselves to cry. So I know some of these things are hard to do for some of you, but I'm going to get into my self-care tips at the end. But here's, again, I want to empower you to lean in, to try it on. What would it feel like to do this or that and the other? And what do you need is the number one question. To check in with yourself. What do I need? What do I need? I know short of, I need my loved one back. I know that place where we're just stuck in disbelief and nothing can feel like it will make it better. Okay, I knew I was going to cry during this. And maybe I'm inviting you to cry. I used to say when I worked for hospice, I should put on my business card, professional crier, and I'm here to help you cry, because tears are beautiful. One of my favorite quotes about grief is, tears are for the soul what soap is for the body. They're cleansing, they're healing, and we have tears for a reason, right? Creator gave us tears for a reason. Okay, so I want you to think about, like, what would you normally do? And this can pull on our heart, thinking about your loved one not being part of that with you. What can you do instead while honoring traditions? I encourage you to create new rituals. And I have a ritual that's a beautiful ritual I'm going to share at the end to help you. So instead of having, that B plan, the next plan, I call it the G plan, the grief plan. Like, grief, we know this. It's not day by day, it's moment by moment. So you sort of have to stay so connected that, okay, I thought I was going to be okay with this plan, but I'm going to go to the next plan. I've got a grief plan. And whatever that grief plan is, have a few backup plans so that you can take care of yourself and say, give permission to your grief, give space for your grief. And the important thing to do is to educate people about your grief. I'm just scrolling down. I did make a few notes, and I'm down here now. To educate people about what grief is like for you. Remember, grief is so unique, as your relationship with your loved one was very unique. Nobody knew what that felt like. And that quote that grief is, what has it go? Grief is the price we pay for loving so deeply. Grief is the price we pay for loving so deeply. It's kind of like, okay, you had so much love with this person, and now we're going to grieve and adjust. And really, for me, grief is the natural and normal process of adjusting to your loved one no longer in the physical form. Another quote I love is that death ends a life, not a relationship. Old school grief counseling was find closure. There's no closure with grief. Grief and the journey of grief will be with you your entire life, as your relationship with your loved one will be part of your life. The adjustment is no longer physically here. So how do you keep that connection? Through memories, I say, talk to your loved one. One process I used to give to my clients is to do a yearly journal where you talk to your loved one in the journal and share, and then imagine what they would say back to you and write that down. Okay. So, and by the way, yes, the first year is the hardest, typically, albeit not the first few months, because there is a gift of grace with grief. And that is the first stages of grief. Often we're kind of numb. We're kind of in shock still. And when we're in shock and numb, our body is kind of doing all kinds of chemical releases to keep us feeling okay. And here's what I want to say to you. And if you're watching this and you want to support someone who's grieving, initially they may say, I'm okay, because they're in that numb shock phase. I encourage you, as a supporter of someone going through grief, to check in later and later and later. But for the person who's grieving, it's again moment to moment shifting and being honest with where you are and trying to communicate as best as you can. I know this is hard, but especially when you're getting bombarded by people early on, like, are you okay? And I know that triggers some people, the are you okay question. I personally say that, how are you doing? Not are you okay? I say, how are you doing? Because I want to know the feelings, the unique journey this person's on. And here's the thing for grievers and those who are supporting, grief is awkward. It's awkward for the person grieving because they're not knowing exactly what they need. They're just trying to just be, navigate moment to moment. And then the supporter, I want to say, can often feel so awkward that they may avoid the first year of grief. The first month, usually people will get past their uncomfortability and show up for their friends that are grieving. But then they want to believe that they're okay and they're going to back out. And truly, the first year is the hardest, but even the second year can be hard, and even many years. So I guess what I'm saying is, griever, when you're mourning the death of a loved one, and I don't care how many years it is, if you're struggling, or I don't want to say struggling, if you're aware there's some grief present, please share that with someone. Please let them know. Please don't say you're okay, and please don't say it's fine. Because here's why. You need to honor your grief, and in honoring your grief and teaching people how to be with your grief, you're also, for those of you who are such caregivers that you don't want to burden anybody with your grief, and I get that, you're inviting them into your grief so they know how to be with their grief when they go through something on their own. So one thing we cannot escape, we're all going to lose, I don't like that word lose, we're all going to experience the death of a loved one or death of a pet. And we're all going to, at some point, take that journey too. And that's another kind of grief, grieving as you get older and how much time do I have left. But I want to stick with the holidays. This is a big topic that I can go into and talk about for a long time. So remember that grief is a unique process for everyone. And so here's something too, even if you've experienced anticipatory grief, your loved one was going through a long process of dying, they had a chronic disease, maybe they were on hospice for a long time, and you kept thinking, oh, maybe, you have the reality check, they're not going to be with me that long. And so you start your grief process. Even that, once the death occurs, it's a different form of grief that comes, and it comes when it comes. And I'm having this image of, it's kind of like, sometimes it's like, oh yeah, it's like when the death happens, it's kind of like before a tsunami. Do you know what happens? The water recedes, right? So I'm doing okay, I feel okay. And then the big wave comes, right? So I'm just sharing my experiences and supporting others, and my own personal experience with grief. I mean, truth be told, I have a hard time every holiday season because I have so many. This is it. Okay, so there's a grief of the death. Like, my mom died when I was 17, my dad when I was 9. There's the grief of missing your loved one, but there's also the grief, especially if you have early grief, the grief of the missed life together, the missed years of not having holidays with your loved one. So I want to just speak to that, because that's a real thing, especially when you're with others who have their family intact. There's, parents, and there's kids, and there's everyone's intact. That can be really isolating because nobody seems to understand what you're feeling. So I want to speak to that. And again, you're on the inside of your world. And so this is what I want to empower you to be so connected to yourself, to your needs, that you can tend to what you need and reach for support when needed, and identify people who can support you and be with you. Okay. And so again, back to if someone says something to you that triggers you in your grief, like, how are you doing? And that doesn't work for you. Here's what I want you to say. Say to your friend, because they're doing the best they can. Remember, people are awkward with death. People are awkward with grief. They are uncomfortable. And you don't want them to run away, because they will. You want them to stay engaged. So, but you need to teach them how. So you say something like, I know, I feel you're trying to help me, and I thank you for that. But that question doesn't really work for me. And then you need to identify what would work better. You can say, instead of asking me how I'm doing, because any minute, I don't know, you could ask me, how can I be with you? Or can I run an errand for you? Or is there something that you need that I can provide for you? Or just tell me what words you long to hear. Truly, again, this teaching others how to be with us is so key. And again, if you're the supporter, you can just say, I have no words. Honestly, I love you so much. I just want to know how to help. And sometimes, though, and I've heard from those who are mourning that can feel overwhelming. So see how tricky this is? Everybody's unique. I've heard from people, when people say, what do you need? I don't know what to ask. I'm already overwhelmed. I can't task somebody with something. I can barely put my shoes on. Okay, you're going to have that response sometimes. Or I would just wish people would just show up and do something. Just do something. Drop off a meal, some flowers, a card. But those of you who are grieving, I do want to empower you again. It's hard to identify, but identify what you need and who can provide that need for you. Okay? So that teaching people how to be with you is so, so important. I'm going to scroll down a bit here. Okay. So the other thing I want to talk about, so I want to get into some ways to be mindful of the holiday season, how it went in the past, and what you can do in the present to take care of yourself and your loved ones who are also grieving, okay? But addressing it is key. And I remember this poem years ago, from hospice. I think that's where I learned of it, but here it is. It's called The Elephant in the Room, because this is what grief is like. Unless you talk about your grief or ask people who are grieving, connect with them, I'm here, how can I be of support? They are all alone with that grief. They're very isolated with that grief. And if that's the choice, and some families do this, they won't even talk about their grief, and then everybody's alone inside with their grief. So this poem is amazing. It's called The Elephant in the Room. I'm going to read it to you now. Let me just scroll down. Okay, the elephant in the room. There is an elephant in the room. It is large and squatting, so it's hard to get around it. Yes, we squeeze by with, how are you? And I'm fine. And 1,000 other forms of trivial chatter. We talk about the weather. We talk about everything else except for the elephant in the room. There is an elephant in the room, and we all know it's there. We're thinking about the elephant as we talk together. It is constantly on our minds. For you see, it is a very, very big elephant, but we do not talk about it. We do not talk about the elephant in the room. Oh, please say their name. Please, let's talk about the elephant in the room. I skipped ahead, but it's okay. For if we talk about his or her death, perhaps then we can talk about his or her life. Whew. Can I say something about my grief or my loved one and have you not look away? Sorry, I'm not sorry. I'm going to help you cry. I'm going to cry. Whew. Can I say to you, can I talk to you about my grief or say his or her name and not have you look away? For if we talk, sorry, I'm getting emotional. I'm going to reread this and do it straight through for you all. And maybe I'll post a link to this poem. Okay. Okay. Can I say their name to you and you not look away? For if I cannot, you are leaving me alone in a room with an elephant. Ooh, okay, so this poem is from Terry Kettering. I'm not going to read it again. I'm just going to post a link for you to get it for yourself. So sadly, people are often feel very alone with their grief, and like I said, others are uncomfortable talking about grief. So identify your fear in talking to someone who's grieving, and try on what would I want, and just start there. But again, start with I want to be of support, and I don't really know how. I'm just here. And grievers, yeah, identify your support team. It's really, really, really important. Who can you call in the middle of the night if you need to? Who can you call and say, I just need a hug? I'll never forget a friend of mine. I've told this story before, I think, on here. Beautiful gift to me. She was going through a hard time, and she called me and she said, this is a demonstration of someone who knew what she needed and knew how to ask for it. So she called and said, I need to come over. I'm not doing okay. Can I come over? Of course. And I'm like preparing, like, ooh, how can I be support? What does she need me to say? What does she need me to do? She walked in and she said, I don't want you to say anything. I don't need you to do anything other than, okay, whew. Let me put my head in your lap. That really touches me, because what vulnerability, right? And can you imagine yourself doing this? And I hope you can. And I hope you have someone you feel safe enough to do this with. And so she put her head in my lap and she bawled. And I just simply had my hand on her back. And she got up. She went, okay, thank you, and walked out my door. That is what I'm talking about, friends. That level of knowing what need is there and knowing who could meet that need, okay? And being brave enough to ask. So, yeah. Okay, so now I want to get to, see, I didn't take my own advice. I don't have any tissue around. And I usually have a scarf on, because those are handy to help you, especially if you're an empath like me and you cry all the time. And crying is so, again, look at my eyes right now. I would say this to people after a good cry, or you just start to cry, you're cleansing, right? Look at how much light I have in my eyes right now, right? My soul is shining through now because I let myself cry. So let yourself cry. Okay. All right. So what were your holiday traditions? And, it's like, again, if you avoid this, something is going to happen. Like, who cuts the turkey? Who does the, oh my God, I didn't think about it. And suddenly the grief is gripping. What do we normally do? How do we do this? How do we honor our loved one? How do we honor our grief? Number one, I say put tissue boxes everywhere, especially on your dinner table. I don't care, get a decorative box. Again, I didn't take my own advice, and I practice taking my own advice because it's important to take your own advice. But put a decorated box of tissue on the table, multiple places. It's, you can stuff the turkey, but don't stuff your emotions, okay? And it signals to everyone at that table, grief is welcomed here. We don't have to pretend. We're going to be real. We're going to feel, okay? And so create a new ritual for honoring your loved one. And I'm going to teach you this ritual that I learned years ago at the end, called the 5 candles. And it's such a beautiful, meaningful ritual that invites people to be present to your loved one and to your grief. Okay. So, share your memories. What did your loved one love about the holidays? Share that. I know it can feel hard and gripping, but that's, grief can be with joy. They can dance together, and joy can be the medicine that grief needs to tend and mend our hearts. Okay. Let their joy of the holiday live through you. What would your dad do? What would your mom say? What were their favorite things about the holiday? Okay. Put on that goofy holiday sweater that your mom used to wear. This is saying, I think the hardest part about the death of a loved one is we think that we have no more connection with them. Let them live through you. Let their memories be with you, okay? Accept what arises and speak to it. I mean, say, "Ooh, I'm noticing something right now. My grief is arising in this moment. Give me a minute, take some deep breaths, tell someone or let them know, and ask for what you need. Hey, could somebody give me a hug right now? I'm really feeling this, or I need to talk about something." The talking is really important, and people shy away from it, like they don't want to burden anyone, but it's kind of like holding all this pressure by yourself. When you start talking about it, it moves out of you, and then it creates space for the healing to come in, right? It's okay. Or go journal about it, okay? All right. So I want to read to you um, the 5 candles ritual. Do I want to read it to you, or do I just want to attack? I'll just talk about it because I don't want to read the whole thing, but I'll attach it or put a link. But I will say this about it. I want to honor where I got it from. Oops. And I guess I closed the window. I'll put the link in the description box, okay? And also, I'm going to continue, especially if you're grieving through the holidays, 20-minute free time with me. Usually that's a time of consultation where we talk about what's going on and what you need and putting a plan of care together with the work that I do. But I'm going to offer that. If you need to talk to somebody for 20 minutes through the holidays about your grief, I'm your gal. Okay. Also, I want to say that there are a number of 24-hour hotlines. And let me tell you, when my niece died, that was a really hard one, of course, and opened up a lot of grief. And it was just so hard, and I was grieving alone because my family was in California and I was alone in Washington. And so that's another kind of grief too. It's like you're kind of out of the bubble of grief, and and there's a thing called disenfranchised grief, where people don't think you would be grieving about that as much as somebody who, say, the mother, or this happens a lot too. Don't discount anybody's feelings or grief. Again, if somebody's grieving, they had a significant connection or love or attachment to the person they're grieving. There's a reason they're grieving. Okay. So, I skipped over the whole thing about, no. Okay. Oh yeah. Here are a couple other tips. Sorry. Create some new traditions. Go for a walk. Go to the cemetery. Of course, many of you do that, or go to a favorite place that your loved one loved, and spend time there. Do something honoring. I would say probably don't release balloons because, I mean, from what I understand, they're not good for the environment. But I can't. You do you. So creating what's the new tradition, and again, identifying what did your loved one do and who's going to do that now. And that can be a really somber moment, where the first time somebody else is cutting the turkey, or somebody else is making the food. That can be sombering, but it could also be honoring, carrying on the traditions. What were their favorite foods? Make sure they're at the table, right? Okay. Now, the last thing, and perhaps the most important reminder I want to offer you, is to take care of you. Extreme, challenging times, grief being one of them, requires extreme, good self-care. So make a list of healthy ways you can comfort yourself and be with yourself, or invite people to be with you. Of course, when there's grief, people tend to want to numb out. I know, I get it. You don't want to feel the immensity of what's going on, but if you delay it, it will possibly grow bigger. So, to the best of your ability, avoid drinking or drinking too much, which is hard. It's a slippery slope when you're drinking. One drink could feel good, the second, the third, pretty soon you're numbing your pain. Or maybe for some people, it's the way they think they're accessing it, but it's it's disconnected. You're not consciously present to your grief. And this is what I'm inviting you to be so mindful and conscious, like you were taking care of a child. What does this child need? Does this child need some alcohol? No, this child needs my love and attention and focus, and embrace that. Okay. So make a list of what you can do for your self-care, taking beautiful, warm, cozy baths, light some candles, go for walks, put on music that is calming to your soul and your mind, make a warm cup of cocoa or your favorite kind of tea. Just extend your care, your love and care for yourself. Wrap yourself in it. Ask yourself, what would my loved one want me to do? What would they suggest, right? And and I'm hearing in my mind, wait a minute, don't say that, because oftentimes people say, oh, my loved one would want me to be happy. Of course they would want you to be happy, but first they'd want you to be well. They want you to fix your broken heart or your broken leg. Remember, if you don't fix the broken leg, take care, tend and mend your broken heart. And then you can be happy while doing this healing work, okay? It's a healing process, grief is. Yes, it's natural and will unfold and you will get better over time. But I wrote a song about this a long time ago. Time heals all wounds, they say. This is a lyric from my song, but not while you're holding it still. In other words, not while you're not doing anything with it, okay? So I already recommended our 24-hour support prayer hotlines. Unity has one. I think Agape International Church has one. Lots of Christian organizations have prayer hotlines. There's also the crisis hotline that is set up to care for people who are grieving. I think that one is a text. You text HOME, HOME, to 741-741 in the US. But Google 24-hour grief support or prayer support and find what you're drawn to, okay? Okay, my soul friends, I just had to do something, It's the one thing I can do is offer this video and offer some love and remind you, even though grief can feel very isolating and you feel very alone, you are not alone. In a way that there is some support available, but you are the only one that can navigate your journey from the inside, right? So be just so ever kind and gentle and gracious to yourself. And I'm with you. My heart and my prayers are with you. And just peace be with you during this very tender time. And that's what I have for you. Plus a big, warm hug. Sending it now to you. All right. Take good care of you. You're worth it. And let me know if you have any questions. You can comment with any questions or send me an email or go to my website at victoriajazwick.com, request that 20-minute consultation or send me a question. Okay. Sending you so much love. Take good care of you. Till next time.